Sure. Okay, everybody. Wow, there's even a couple of grad students here. I'm so impressed. So my honors class is here, and online students, I'm always so excited to meet you guys because to see physical presence, it's awesome. And I'm so happy about María González being here, professor at the National Autonomous University. I always say University of Mexico, that's wrong. She just had a short kind of quick session with my honors class here. She's a professor of philosophy, and as we were walking along and talking about different things, she told me, actually what I like doing the most is hardcore philosophy. And that's the kind of feedback they got. So if anybody is interested in some hardcore philosophy to back up whatever you're doing, she's amazing. On her feet, with 5 minutes with each of these guys, and they'll testify to it, she was coming up with names and books and things that you should think about. But coming from, Nietzsche and Foucault and Heidegger, just like the guys that are the backbone of how we think. So with that, I'll just introduce her to tell you a little bit about the Art Science Collective that she's leading there, which we're making a network with, the Art Science Center. So give her a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. And most of all, thank you very much, Victoria, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here at UCLA, and thank you all for coming to this presentation. So I will keep this short. I have divided the presentation in two parts. First part is the philosophical one, and second part, I will show you the slides and the videos of what, thank you very much, of what we have been doing in Mexico City in the Art Science group. But for me, it's very important first to give the theoretical framework in philosophical terms, because what we have been doing in the Art Science group in Mexico City is very much related to the philosophical framework. And also the experience doing the projects in the group has made me think about some topics in the art and science field. So I will read a couple of pages with these questions. And if you want to interrupt me at any point, if anything is not clear enough, and it won't be clear enough, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. So the main topic is art and science, but then we should seriously ask why art and science and how art and science. I mean, the topic is out there, but we still have to do the question. So the first thing would be to think about the state of the matter. How is art and science working now? Because the field is too broad, and just speaking about art and science, we could talk about physics, mathematics, chemistry, biotechnology, biology, and it's the same with arts. I mean, art is a field that is very large, and what about traditional arts or wet arts or digital arts? So maybe if we want to give this a more profound meaning, we should start narrowing it down to what we do understand by art and what do we understand by science in each specific case. Not necessarily doing this empirically, like creating a theory for every project, but in a more specific way, not this broad art and science, whatever. So the state of the matter. To think about the state of the matter, instead of doing it historically, I propose to analyze the theoretical frameworks that allow us to think and criticize the relationship between art and science from a philosophical perspective. The movement of biotech arts, or arts that work with biomedia, or even bioart, regardless the problems with the definitions that we can, of course, discuss here. And the problems with definition of bioart is huge. As some of you may know, there is a definition that goes that bioart is art in vivo. and that we are only talking about bioart and art biotech when we have works or artworks in vivo. But I do not agree with this definition, because also using traditional arts to address problems of biotechnology, for example, in my opinion, counts as bioart, not only because we are struggling about the label, that who is actually allowed to use the label and name themselves as bioartists, but because the issues about biotechnology and what is happening with science is, of course, much more broad than just addressing the media, that you are doing bioart because you are using living animals or living bacteria. The topics are so big, for example, I don't know, with genetics, that even doing paintings about that can be considered as bioart, and also because images in sciences are so important that producing images and not only art in vivo is also very important for thinking about art and biotechnology and producing biotech arts. But as I said before, the definition of bioart or art that works with biomedia is still a big debate in the medium. So the movement of biotech arts is more or less recent, as you may know, and it started in the late 90s. The relationship between art and science is, of course, much more longer than that. And in order to analyze it properly, we should at least have an idea of what is art and what is science. And of course, these are big questions. What is art and what is science? Fortunately, I'm a philosopher, and this means that I pose questions. I do not answer questions. So I will stick to the question, what is art, what is science? And I will constantly be wandering around these same questions. So this is a tremendous task. In order to be done, requires the historical construction of the models, because from my point of view, neither art or science are subject to a definition. Of course that you have theories that think that art can have a definition, or that science can have a definition, but in my philosophical perspective, neither art or science are subject to a definition, no matter how extended it is, but require to understand them more specifically. I don't know what, okay, no, just push, okay. Require to understand it more specifically. Wait. According to contextual circumstances. From that perspective, it is pointless to say that since the beginning of times, there has been an intertwining between art and science. Because what art was in the ancient Greece, for example, has almost nothing to do with what art is nowadays. So this is an important topic for me, because if we talk about art and science, it has been there since the beginning, because I don't know, in ancient Greece, they were producing art, they were producing science. There was an intertwining between art and science, but what the ancient Greece understand as art has, I insist on that, almost nothing to do with our understanding of art. Of course that this is debatable, and that you will have art history telling a different story, that we can tell art history since the Neolithic, almost since the Neolithic to nowadays, but this is debatable, of course. And this is the same for science. If we consider art history, there is a possibility of linking the different periods or modes of art through narrativity, and then build a plot that puts together the different moments and that can actually bring about a history for art. Beyond the criticism that one can do to these meta-histories, with its quota of universalization, what is important for me to point out is that the task of narrativity is building a plot, therefore producing an order for the diverse. And this is what history as narrativity does. We can therefore produce a plot for the intertwining of art and science. And it would be very interesting to the state of the matter. What is happening in the art and science field? What are the possibilities and the limits? And what have we been doing in the art and science group that I lead in the National University in Mexico to cope with the question? of the sensible world. And this is a philosophical statement, more or less, that I will repeat. Art and science as models of interpretation and production of the sensible world. And for philosophy, it's the same. It is a model for interpretation and production of the sensible world. As you can see, I use interpretation and production because I think that science, art, and philosophy are at the same time producing interpretations of the world, and that these interpretations are actually producing the real world in which we live on. To produce this investigation. Nevertheless, what I want to consider here is the first thing is to state that I understand art and science as models of interpretation of the sensible world. And this is a philosophical statement, more or less, that I will repeat. Art and science as models of interpretation and production of the sensible world. And for philosophy, it's the same. It is a model for interpretation and production of the sensible world. As you can see, I use interpretation and production because I think that science, art, and philosophy are at the same time producing interpretations of the world, and that these interpretations are actually producing the real world in which we live on. And that the way to make the intercrossing meaningful is not by highlighting the similarities, but the differences, and not only between art and science, but between the different arts and the different sciences. The challenge is not to think it from a broader scope, but a very narrow one, and then to try to produce meaning from there. For the past decade, much of the theoretical discourse about art and science has been apologetic, as an attempt to legitimize the incursion of arts in the sacred realm of science. This is understandable due to the position that each practice occupies in our worldview. And really, almost everything that you can read about art and science from the past years is apologetic, just telling that it is important to do art and science and that we should support the field and that artists have the right to go inside the lab and that art is also